Hey, everybody, and we're back. We took a leave of absence. I got the flu, 6 weeks, got tested. It wasn't COVID, but let me tell you something, that garden variety flu is no picnic. So take care of yourselves. I want to thank everybody for all the responses. We're on 4 different platforms. We got a lot of requests, a lot of ideas, a lot of good feedback, a lot of positive feedback. Thank you so much for that. We really do appreciate it. We had a schedule of all the different topics we we're going to cover. That was blown out the door because your ideas and your questions and inquiries were far better than anything that we had on our list. So today we're going to talk about a skill, a leadership skill that often isn't thought of as a skill. This comes from Robert, one of my students from our leadership class. He had sent me a email at learning@Synergetics USA and said, Dave, we learned a little bit about this in leadership. I'd really love for you to expand on it a little bit more. I'm just going to give you a little more insight on what this very important leadership skill that often is overlooked. So let's check it out. Okay, so here we're back at Close Encounters of the Humankind, understanding that leadership is about the people and how you get the work done through people. The other side of things is management. That's the administrative side, the performance evaluations, and all the different things that we need to do as managers. So there's a difference, clear difference between leadership and management. This is about leadership. We're going to be talking about a critical skill for success. And I bet you're wondering what that is. So let's get into it. One of the most critical skills for a career in the infinite game, as described by Simon Sinek, is perspective. But we don't think of perspective as a skill, but it is in fact a very important skill. Our ability to frame the work that we do and the mission that we're about is about establishing our own perspective. If we have a positive perspective, even in adversity, we will come up with good solutions because we're not in a panic mode. So perspective is very important. It's about a single moment. So let's talk about that. The ability to create or establish meaning in the present moment with great clarity is what perspective is all about. I learned about perspective from a few different places, but primarily from a book that I read by Viktor Frankl called Man's Search for Meaning. Sounds like an ominous piece of literature, but I read the entire book on a flight from Grand Rapids, Michigan into Orange County, California. It did not take that long. And a little bit about Viktor Frankl. He was a Jewish psychologist who survived years at Auschwitz. He was a Holocaust survivor, and he focused in extremely bleak moments, ones that you and I could not even imagine, how to maintain a perspective by appreciating the smaller things. He might say they lived for seeing the sunrise or finding that single flower out on the work compound where he was put into slave labor and abused. Anyone who can go through this type of suffering and still maintain a desire to live is special. We won't be experiencing anything near what Viktor Frankl experienced on the job. So we have to put things in perspective. What we deal with is not going to kill us. It's important, there is no doubt, but it won't kill us. So let's talk about this. For Frankl, the meaning came from 3 possible sources. One was purposeful work, which is what we're all about here at Synergetics USA. Love and the courage to face adversity, those challenges. As a leader, to have the courage to have difficult conversations or deal with difficult situations. If we put things in perspective, that skill will allow us to survive and thrive in those circumstances. So in between what's happening and how you respond to it is a space. So we talk about stimulus and response. There's a space in between there. That space can be anywhere from microseconds to a couple of days. Let me explain. You have a situation that comes up. That's the stimulus. And being a leader, we have to respond, right? But oftentimes leaders don't respond. What do? They react. They allow the emotional side of the brain to kick in and immediately respond without thinking through the outcomes. So we're going to talk about the space that happens in between stimulus and response. Sometimes when I'm asked a very complex question, instead of trying to answer it, what I'll say is, that's an excellent question. Let me think about that and I'll get back to you. Now, depending on the circumstance, may dictate how much time you have to actually get back to them. Sometimes you can't say, give me a few days. I'm going to go off into the desert and think about this. That's not the case, right? What we have to do is give ourselves the space to respond versus react, right? React is the emotional response. It's a knee-jerk reaction, right? But a response is a thoughtful suggestion. Now, oftentimes, I might even say, what do you think? Right? Or, give me all the information. Tell me more about this. Because there's a lot of information that may not have been presented during that stimulus box to the left. And in order to have an appropriate response, you may need more information. Or you may want to ask the opinion of your team. What do you think about this? Maybe even, how do you feel about this? That's super important. And in this space, we reference our beliefs and interpret our world, and we make choices. If we believe or we have a positive attitude, we're going to look at the opportunities rather than the problems. But if we're negative, then we're going to feed the fire and cause more problems, cause more harm than good. So it's super important that we take the time to say, I am the good leader. I want to promote positive relationships. How do I accomplish this? And those choices dictate our results, and that's important to remember. We have more control than we believe when it comes to how large the space is between the two, between the stimulus and response. We don't always recognize that we do have that power to think through how we want to respond. So consider that a part of the skill set of perspective, is taking control of that power and expanding that space so that we can come with the best response, the most helpful response to the individual or the group that we're working with as leaders. There was a bumper sticker that I remember. It says, life is 10% of what happens to you and 90% how you respond to it. And that is so true when it comes to this matter of perspective, that we may not be able to control what happens to us. But as Viktor Frankl says in his book, we have total control out of how we respond to it. And that's important to remember. We believe we see the world as it is when in fact we see the world as we are. So if we can control our perspective, if we can maintain a positive approach of value, of contribution, that is probably the most important element within our perspective, is how we choose to view the world. Now, the saying, perception is reality, may be a little scary, but when you think about it, it's actually very true. How people perceive things creates their belief system. It impacts their belief system, and that becomes their reality, their perspective. we need to coach our people to take on a healthy, positive perspective. It allows us to be able to work easier together. It creates harmonious relationships, and we become more productive, more innovative, and more creative. So perspective carries a tremendous amount of power in how we create outcomes, both in our relationships and in the products and services our organization provides. Being in the moment means being in control of that space. That space is the room, if you will, for our perspective to thrive if we feed it. It's the difference between a response and reaction. Just like I said earlier, oftentimes reactions tend to be emotional, and that's very difficult to manage because as human beings, we have both thoughts and emotions. So we need to be able to control the emotion enough to bring clarity to the thought. And then we have that space to decide how we're going to respond. So, in conclusion, think about your perspective. Even write down what you want to have as your perspective. I am a positive leader. I'm a good leader. I'm a leader who wants to motivate and inspire their people to do their best work. I believe that harmonious relationships are what give power to our team and our organization. I appreciate you taking the time to listening today. Please do me a favor, hit subscribe at the bottom, depending on your platform, of course. Contact us at learning@synergeticsusa.org if you have any ideas of skills that you would like to learn a little more about. And if you're interested in seeing some of the courses that we offer, go and visit us at www.synergeticsusa.org. This is Dave at Synergetics. You have an awesome week. Be a good leader, and we'll see you next time.